Isabella Cortez was nothing more than a bounty in a ruthless deal, handed over into servitude to save her family from ruin. Her fate was not decided by the harsh farmer Jack McCrow, but by the corrupt sheriff Henry Blackwood, who wanted to take not only land, but the very souls of all who stood in his way. But fate had its own plan. The most fragile girl found incredible strength to uncover a shocking conspiracy and turn everything on its head. What actually happened in the courtroom, and how did this story end? Subscribe and like to learn the whole truth. The climax of this drama will truly shock you, teach you wisdom, and show you why justice, in the end, triumphed. Watch until the very end so you don't miss the powerful conclusion of this story. A brand. Not the brand of a thief or a tramp, but a brand that Isabella Cortez felt on her soul, heavy as red-hot iron. She was a bounty, merely a means for her father, an old, worn-out farmer, to pay off a debt. The land they lived on was their life, their only treasure. But for the second straight year, it was as ruthless as the very man to whom they now owed, Jack Red Canyon McCrow. His name was spoken in whispers, full of fear, in every saloon and market in Dodge City. They said he was merciless, that his eyes could burn through you, and his hand knew no mercy. He held half the county in his hands, and his men were as tough as he was. No one dared to cross him. He was the law, and he was its enforcer. Isabella, with her olive skin, raven black hair, and eyes full of fire, seemed to be the embodiment of an alien and beautiful world that did not fit into the rough reality of the Wild West. She was 20, and she had known since childhood that she had to be strong, but the fear of McCrow squeezed her heart in icy clamps. She imagined him as a beast, and herself as a defenseless prey. Her soul was filled with hatred for the man who had turned her life into a complete nightmare. She saw him in her nightmares, huge, ruthless, with eyes full of cold, like ice in a February blizzard. She was preparing for the very worst. That morning, when it was time to leave for his ranch, she put on her best dress, worn out but clean, and said goodbye to her father and younger brother. She did not cry. Tears were a luxury she could not afford. She forced herself to be as hard as a rock, because she knew that she was heading into hell. When they brought her to the ranch, she saw him. He was standing on the porch, tall as a rock, with broad shoulders and narrow hips, dressed in faded jeans and a leather vest, unbuttoned over his mighty chest. Through the dust and heat, she saw his face, which seemed to be carved from stone. His hair was light brown, almost white from the sun, and his eyes were the color of blue ice. They looked at her without emotion, without interest, as if she was just another object in his vast possession. "So you're Cortez?" His voice was low and hoarse, like the rustle of gravel. "Isabella," she answered, clenching her teeth. "Doesn't matter. You'll work in the kitchen, and then you'll do the laundry. It's in the contract." He turned away without waiting for a reply. It was even more humiliating than she had expected. Her hatred grew stronger. She was not just a servant, she was invisible. Her first morning on the ranch began before dawn. The kitchen was huge and smoky, and the cooks were bearded men who didn't even look at her, as if she were a ghost. Isabella washed dishes, peeled potatoes, carried heavy buckets of water. Every muscle in her body screamed from exhaustion, but she continued to work like a robot. She wanted to prove to them that she was not weak. Anger boiled in her soul, and she decided that she would work so hard that he himself would regret his contract. She wanted McCrow to see that she wouldn't break. And so, on the third day, an incident occurred that shook her beliefs. In the morning, when she was carrying out buckets of dirty water, one of the cowboys, Slim, tripped her, and she fell. The dirty water spilled on her dress, and she felt her face burning with shame and fury. The cowboy laughed, and his friends joined in. Isabella, ignoring the pain in her bruised knee, got up. Her eyes met his mocking ones, and she was about to tell him everything she thought of him and his friends. But then she heard another voice. "Slim, what's going on here?" It was McCrow. His voice was menacing, like thunder. Slim immediately stopped laughing, his face turned pale. "Just a joke, boss," he muttered. "A joke, you say? You tripped the girl, and you're laughing. Get out of here. And don't let me see you touch any of my people again." "But I said, get out." McCrow stepped forward, and his shadow covered Slim. He immediately backed away. Jack approached Isabella. She was still standing, pressing her hand to her bruised knee, and anger still burned in her eyes. "Are you all right?" he asked. His tone was dry, but there was no mockery in it. "Yes," she whispered, unable to believe what was happening. He held out his hand to her. She hesitated, and then slowly, carefully, put her palm in his. His skin was rough, calloused, but his grip was firm, not harsh. He helped her up. He didn't even look at her dirty dress. "He's going to work in the stable for a week," he said, addressing one of his men, "and give this girl new clothes." He looked at her again, but this time there was not ice in his gaze, but something else, something that made Isabella freeze. He turned and left, leaving her in complete bewilderment. Her hatred did not go away, but a new feeling was added to it. Interest. Why did he defend her? It didn't fit the image of the ruthless beast she had created in her mind. She didn't know what to think. Her world was black and white, and he had just added a gray shade to it. Isabella realized that she would have to learn more about him to understand his motives. Her interest in him grew stronger, and it was the most unexpected and disturbing thing that had ever happened to her. After that incident, Slim avoided her, and the other workers began to treat her with cautious, but obvious, respect. No one dared to mock her again. Isabella continued to work, but now she did so not only because of the debt, but also because of her curiosity. She watched Jack carefully. Each day brought new details that destroyed the image she had created in her head. He got up before everyone else. Isabella saw him get on his horse and ride out into the prairie to check on the herd. He always returned when the sun had not yet risen high, and his face was covered with dust, and his hair was tangled. He didn't make others do work that he could do himself. He worked alongside his men, and sometimes even more. He was not just a boss, he was a part of this land, as dry, hard, and strong as it was. In her eyes, he ceased to be just Red Canyon, and became Jack, a man who had his own world, his own rules, and his own principles. She saw how he talked to the old, gray-bearded cook, Henry, who had worked on the ranch for many years. He didn't shout at him, didn't swear, but just calmly said what needed to be done. He was strict, but fair. One day, when the old cook, Henry, cut his hand, McCrow immediately took him to the house, washed the wound himself, and bandaged it before sending for a doctor. He was not a heartless monster. He was a leader who cared for his people, albeit in his own, harsh way. Isabella noticed that many of his men, though they feared his anger, respected him. Her interest gradually turned into admiration. Not admiration for his wealth or power, but admiration for his character, his strength, and his resilience. She saw that he didn't just acquire his fortune, but earned it through hard work. She saw how he protected his people, how he cared for them, how he bore the burden of responsibility for all the land and everyone who lived on it. In the 1880s, this was a huge burden. He was like an old oak that withstood all storms to protect the grove beneath it. She began to see him not as a predator, but as a protector. One night, Isabella couldn't sleep. She went out onto the porch to get some fresh air and saw Jack McCrow, sitting on a bench, looking at the stars. She was about to go back so as not to bother him, but he suddenly called to her. "Come here," he said. His voice was surprisingly soft. She slowly walked over and sat down next to him. There was not a single cloud in the sky, and the stars shone so brightly, as she had never seen in the city. "I know what you think of me," he said, without looking at her. "That I'm cruel, that I'm a monster." Isabella didn't know what to say. She had expected this, but was not ready. "I used to be different," he continued. "My father was a kind man. He believed in justice and that good always triumphs. But in this world, kindness is a weakness. I lost everything because of it. My family, they were killed. And I swore that no one would ever be able to hurt me again." He fell silent, and Isabella felt her heart tighten with compassion. She saw not ice in his eyes, but deep pain. Pain that was similar to her own. She realized that his harshness was just a mask, a defense against a cruel world that had once taken everything he loved. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He turned his head and looked at her. His gaze was no longer icy, but warm. "You're not like them," he said. "You're strong. You didn't break." This conversation changed everything. Isabella's hatred and fear finally disappeared, giving way to compassion and understanding. She began to see in him not only a strong man, but also a wounded soul who needed healing. The next day, during lunch, one of the cowboys, Jim, began to tease her. He said, "What, McCrow, have you got a pet now?" The cowboys laughed. Something broke inside Isabella. She was no longer afraid of him, but Jim's words were like a dagger thrust. She looked at Jack, who had heard all this, and waited for his reaction. To her surprise, he didn't shout or threaten. He just looked at Jim, and there was such cold fury in his gaze that Jim immediately fell silent. "She's not a pet," McCrow said calmly. "She's a person. And if you don't respect her, you won't respect me." He looked at Isabella again. This time there was not only compassion in his gaze, but also attraction. Isabella felt her cheeks flush. She had never thought he could look at her like that. She realized that he saw in her not just a worker, but a woman. And it was even more disturbing. She felt the tension growing between them, as if they were two magnets that were attracted to each other, despite the fact that they should have been repelled. Isabella realized that the story of her life, which had begun as a tragedy, was turning into something else, something she could not have imagined. And this something was even more dangerous than hatred. It was hope. Hope that could either save her or destroy her. She felt trapped, but it was a trap in which she was unexpectedly comfortable. This attraction was something new and frightening for her. All her life she had known only fear, fatigue, and pain. Now, in this hostile environment, she found something that felt native. She began to find meaning in her work, not just as paying off a debt, but as an opportunity to be near him, to watch him, to get to know him. She saw how he coped with difficulties, how he made decisions, how he behaved with his men. He was a complex man, full of contradictions, and that made him even more appealing. She felt that he also saw something special in her, something that set her apart from everyone else, that gave her a chance to be something more than just a bounty. One day, as she was washing dishes, Jack came up to her. He silently took the bucket of water she was about to carry and carried it himself. Isabella was in shock. "I can do it myself," she said, but he simply ignored her words. He carried the bucket, poured out the water, and filled it with fresh water, before returning and putting it back in place. Not a word was said, but this small gesture meant more to her than all the words in the world. He cared about her. He saw her. It was so unexpected, so contradictory, that Isabella didn't know how to react. She didn't know how to live in a world where the man she hated showed her kindness. Her heart was in turmoil. She felt that her life was about to change. She was no longer trapped. She was on the verge of something new and unknown, and she was as afraid of it as she longed for it. She knew that her feelings for him could be dangerous. She knew that he could break her heart if she trusted him, but at the same time, she could not help but succumb to this feeling, this attraction that was growing in her soul. Months on the Red Canyon Ranch flew by for Isabella like days, filled with hard work and unexpected discoveries. Her attraction to Jack McCrow grew, fueled by his every glance, every silent gesture of care. He didn't say much, but his actions spoke louder than words. He always made sure she didn't overwork herself, sometimes personally brought her food, and once even gave her a new, warmer shawl when he noticed she was cold on chilly evenings. These small acts were so unexpected for her that she felt her heart melting. She was no longer afraid of him, and her former hatred now seemed ridiculous and absurd. She saw that behind his rough exterior and harsh character was a man with a big, wounded heart. One night, when the whole ranch was asleep, Isabella couldn't sleep. She was tormented by thoughts of her family. She missed her father and brother, their home, their old life. She went out onto the porch to get some fresh air and saw Jack. He was standing by the corral, leaning against the wooden fence, and looking at the stars. She was about to go back into the house so as not to bother him, but he suddenly called to her. "Can't sleep?" His voice was quiet, almost unrecognizable. "I miss home," she admitted. Jack nodded. "I know what that's like," he said. "This used to be my home, and I thought it would always be. But fate has its own plans." He told her about his father, about how he was killed by bandits, about how he, still just a boy, swore that he would never trust people again. His words were full of pain, and Isabella felt her heart tighten with compassion. She realized that his cruelty was not an innate quality, but a defensive reaction to the pain he had experienced. Jack told her about his family, which he had lost, and she shared with him her fears about her family, who were in danger. For the first time in her life, she felt that someone understood her. He didn't just listen, he heard her, and that was as important to her as his care. They talked until dawn, and by the end of the conversation, Isabella felt as if she had known him all her life. But their idol was shattered. A new sheriff appeared in Dodge City, Henry Blackwood. He was a man whom everyone feared and hated. He was cruel, corrupt, and greedy. He was not like Jack, who was harsh but fair. Blackwood was evil in its purest form. His eyes were empty, and his smile was cold. Isabella immediately realized that he was dangerous. He came to take Jack's land, and he would stop at nothing to achieve his goal. Jack knew this, but he could do nothing. He could not openly fight the sheriff, because that would be against the law, and Jack always obeyed the law, despite his reputation. He was trapped. His men feared Blackwood, and even old Henry, who had always been loyal to Jack, began to doubt their future. Tension on the ranch grew. Everyone understood that they were on the verge of big trouble. Jack was furious. He could not believe that a man like Blackwood could take everything he had built with his hard work. He did not want to show his weakness, but Isabella saw how he suffered. She saw him spend sleepless nights thinking about how to save his ranch and his people. She wanted to help him, but she didn't know how. One day, when Jack was in town, Blackwood and his men came to the ranch. He was looking for Jack, but he didn't find him. He was angry, and, to vent his rage, he decided to humiliate Isabella. He approached her, grabbed her by the arm, and tried to drag her into the barn. She tried to break free, but he was too strong. She screamed, but no one came to help. The cowboys who were nearby were afraid to intervene. She felt that her life was on a thread, that she was about to become his victim. Her heart was beating like a trapped bird. She closed her eyes and prepared for the worst. But then she heard a familiar hoarse voice. "Let her go, Blackwood." It was Jack. He arrived at the very last moment. He stood on his horse like a grim rider, his eyes burning with fury. Blackwood let go of Isabella and laughed. "What, McCrow, came to save your pet?" he said. "She's not yours, and your ranch won't be yours soon either. It'll take everything you love from you." Jack's face was stone. He slowly dismounted his horse and approached Blackwood. "You can take my land," he said. His voice was low and threatening. "But you'll never be able to take my pride from me, and you'll never be able to take my people from me." Isabella realized that Jack was not just defending her, he was defending everyone he loved. He was ready to sacrifice his life to save them. Blackwood sneered. "Well, see, McCrow, we'll see each other in court. And I promise you, you'll lose everything. Now, get off my land." Jack looked at him. He knew he couldn't respond to his challenge, because it would be a violation of the law. He turned and left. But Isabella saw pain, anger, and helplessness in his eyes. He was trapped. He was strong, but even his strength could not save him from Blackwood's villainy. From that moment on, life on the ranch changed. The cowboys became restless, and many of them began to get ready to leave. They feared Blackwood and did not believe that Jack could save them. Isabella saw how Jack tried to keep them, but his words were an empty sound. They didn't believe in him because they didn't believe in themselves. The tension grew every day. Isabella, realizing that Jack was in danger, decided to help him. She knew that he could not openly oppose Blackwood, but she could. She knew that Blackwood had his secrets, and she decided to find them. She began to ask people in the city, to gather rumors, and, to her surprise, she found what she was looking for. She found evidence that Blackwood was not just a sheriff, but a corrupt criminal. She found evidence of his connections to bandits and his involvement in cattle rustling. Isabella realized that this was her chance to save Jack. She decided to go to him and show him everything she had found. She came to his office, and, to her surprise, he was not alone. With him was an old, wise judge who was a friend of his father's. Jack told him about Blackwood, and the judge told him that he needed evidence. Isabella, without hesitation, showed him everything she had found. The judge was in shock. He could not believe that a sheriff could be so vile. He promised that he would consider her evidence and help Jack. Jack looked at Isabella. In his eyes there was tenderness and gratitude. He had not expected her to do this for him. He walked over to her and hugged her. "You saved me," he whispered. Isabella felt her heart beating like crazy. She realized that she loved him. She loved this harsh, wounded man who was ready to sacrifice everything for her and his people. She was no longer trapped. She was his ally, and she was ready to fight for him to the end. She realized that she had found not just salvation, she had found love. The court hearing in Dodge City became the main event of the month. In the small, stuffy courthouse, everyone gathered. Farmers, cowboys, merchants, and even women who were curious. The atmosphere was heated, like the air before a thunderstorm. On one side stood the massive, calm Jack McCrow, who seemed to bear not only the weight of his own name, but also the fate of everyone who depended on his ranch. Next to him, brave, with her head held high, stood Isabella. She was the embodiment of fragile determination, and her presence there was no less important than the words she had to speak. Across from them sat Sheriff Henry Blackwood, whose smile was repulsively fake, and whose eyes were empty, like a sun-scorched desert. He was dressed in a clean, impeccable suit that contrasted sharply with his dirty soul. Next to him was his lawyer, predatory and slick as a snake, and behind them were his dogs, whose gazes were full of threats. Isabella was nervous, but her fear was replaced by anger. She remembered the faces of her father and brother. She remembered her fear of Macro, which turned out to be just a mask, and now she was looking at the real monster. It was this man, Blackwood, who was the cause of all her troubles. She was full of determination, and that feeling gave her strength. When the judge addressed her, she raised her head and began to speak. Her voice was as firm as steel. She told them what she had heard in the saloons, about Blackwood's conspiracy with bandits, about how he stole cattle from neighboring ranches to drive the farmers to ruin. She spoke of his cruelty and his greed, and there was not a drop of doubt in her words. Blackwood and his lawyer tried to interrupt her, shouting that she was lying, that she was just a servant of Macro whom he had bribed. But Isabella did not succumb to their provocations. She continued to speak, and her words were supported by the facts she had found. She showed the judge a letter that she had found in Blackwood's office, a letter in which he was making a deal with the bandits. The letter was irrefutable evidence of his guilt. The judge, an old friend of Jack's father, was stunned. He looked at Blackwood, and his face was full of anger. "Henry Blackwood," he said, his voice trembling, "you are arrested for cattle rustling, conspiracy, and corruption. You have failed not only this town, but the entire law you swore to serve." Blackwood was in shock. His face turned pale. His eyes bugged out of their sockets. He could not believe that his plan was collapsing, that his villainy had been exposed. He rushed at Isabella. His eyes were full of hatred. He grabbed her arm, but Jack immediately pushed him away. "Don't you dare touch her!" he roared. Blackwood was in a rage. He pulled out a pistol and fired. The bullet did not hit Jack, but it hit the judge, who was trying to stop Blackwood. Chaos erupted in the courtroom. People screamed, ran in different directions, and Jack and his men tried to catch Blackwood. But he was too fast. He ran out of the courthouse and got on the horse that was waiting for him outside. He galloped through the city, and his laughter was full of madness. He was free, but his reputation was ruined, and he swore to get revenge. Jack's anger was boundless. He had lost not only a friend, but also faith in the law. He realized that justice does not always win, that evil can escape punishment. His world, which he had built for so long, was collapsing before his eyes. He was ready to pursue Blackwood to the end of his days, but Isabella stopped him. "Jack," she said, "you have to stay. Your people need you. You have to protect them." He looked at her, and there was pain in his eyes. He realized that she was right. He had to protect those who believed in him, who depended on him. He had to be strong, and he knew that he could. He knew that he had to. Meanwhile, Blackwood hid in the prairies. He was alone, without money and without friends. His accomplices abandoned him when they found out that he had become a criminal. He was in despair, and his despair was turning into madness. He swore to get revenge on Isabel and Jack. He knew that he had to make them suffer as he had suffered. A few days later, he appeared at Jack's ranch. But he was not alone. With him were bandits he had hired in the city. They were ready for anything for money, and they were not afraid of Jack. They were ready to do anything to get their share. They attacked the ranch at night. They burned barns, killed cattle, and wounded several cowboys. Isabel and Jack were furious. They could not believe that Blackwood could be so cruel. He did not just want revenge. He wanted to destroy them, and they knew that they had to stop him. They had to fight for their ranch, for their lives. They had to fight for their love. Jack gathered his men. He was calm, but his eyes were burning with fury. "We won't give up," he said. "We will fight. We will defend our home." The cowboys, who had been afraid before, were now full of determination. They saw how Jack was fighting for them, and they were ready to fight for him. Isabella, who had always been fragile and weak, was now strong. She took a rifle and stood next to Jack. She was not afraid. She was ready to fight. She was ready to die for him. She realized that her life no longer belonged to her. It belonged to him. At dawn the next day, they were ready. They were waiting for Blackwood. He did not make them wait. He appeared on the horizon, and his laughter could be heard from afar. He was full of confidence. He thought he would win, but he didn't know that he was facing not just one man, but a whole army that was ready to fight for their lives. The battle was fierce. The bandits were well armed, but the cowboys were determined. They fought with despair, with fury, and they were winning. They fought for their home, for their people, for their lives. Isabella fought alongside Jack. She shot like a real cowboy, and she didn't miss. She was so focused on the battle that she didn't notice that one of the bandits had crept up behind her. But Jack noticed. He pushed her away and took the bullet himself. Isabella was in shock. She saw him fall to the ground, his blood coloring the dust. She rushed to him, but it was too late. Blackwood, who saw all this, laughed. "Now you know what it's like to lose everything, Macro," he screamed. He was full of glee, but his joy was short-lived. Jack's men, full of rage, rushed at Blackwood. They showed him no mercy. They avenged their leader. Blackwood was killed, but his death did not bring them relief. They had lost their leader. Isabella sat on the ground, holding Jack's body in her hands. She was crying, and her tears mixed with his blood. She could not believe that he was gone. He was her savior, her protector, her love, and now he was dead. She was in despair. She was in horror, but suddenly she heard him whisper, "I am okay." He was wounded, but not fatally. The bullet hit his arm, and he lost a lot of blood, but he was alive. Isabella was so happy that she could not believe it. She hugged him, and he hugged her back. "You saved me," she whispered. "You took the bullet for me. I love you," he said. "I couldn't let them hurt you." Isabella didn't know what to say. She just held on to him. At that moment she realized that she had found not just love, but a family. She had found a home. After the gunshots fell silent, and the dust settled over the ranch, it became clear that the battle for Red Canyon was over. The enemy was defeated, but the victory came at a high price. Jack was wounded, and this became the biggest trial for Isabella. She could not leave his side for a minute, spending sleepless nights, changing bandages, applying herbs that she collected in the canyon, and simply sitting next to him, holding his hand. In those days, she saw him not as a harsh leader, but as a vulnerable, wounded man who needed her love and care. He was strong in spirit, but the wound was serious. The bullet, fortunately, did not hit vital organs, but passed close to the bone, and he lost a lot of blood. Fever held him for several days, and Isabella, forgetting about sleep and food, cared for him like her own child. She talked to him, read him poems, sang him lullabies, and in her voice, he found comfort. In those days, he realized that his love for her was not just a fleeting infatuation, but a deep and strong feeling that gave him the strength to live. He realized that she was his heart, his soul, his anchor in this turbulent world. He, a man who had relied only on himself his entire life, now understood that he could not live without her. When Jack finally recovered, he was a different man. His eyes were no longer icy, a light and warmth had appeared in them. He became more open, kinder, and his harshness, which was his defense, was gone. He realized that his strength was not in loneliness and not in cruelty, but in the people who surrounded him, and in the love that supported him. He realized that his revenge on Blackwood would not have brought him happiness. Happiness was in living, loving, and protecting those who were dear to him. He realized that his wound, which seemed so tragic, was a blessing for him. It showed him that life is not only a struggle, but also love, and that he must cherish every moment of it. He first went to town to talk to Isabella's father, the old farmer. Seeing how Jack had changed, and knowing how much his daughter loved this man, agreed. He was happy that his daughter had found not only protection, but also true love. He realized that her fate, which had seemed so tragic, had turned into a happy story, and that she was no longer a bounty, but had become a wife and mother. The wedding was modest but warm. All the cowboys from the ranch, as well as other farmers and townspeople who knew and respected Jack, came to their wedding. Isabella was in a simple but beautiful dress, made of white cotton, and Jack was dressed in his best suit. Their eyes shone with happiness, and everyone who saw them said that they were the embodiment of true love and family happiness. After the wedding, they began a new life on the ranch, and it turned into a real home. Jack, who used to be a strict boss, became a father to everyone who lived and worked on his land. He listened to them, helped them in trouble, and they responded with sincere devotion. He became for them not just a leader, but a true friend. He realized that power and wealth do not bring happiness, and that happiness is in being part of something bigger than yourself. He realized that his wound, which seemed so tragic, was a blessing for him. It showed him that life is not only a struggle, but also love, and that he must cherish every moment of it. Isabella was his ally in everything. She managed the ranch, kept order, cooked for the cowboys, and, most importantly, She was his conscience, his heart. She helped him make decisions, and her wisdom and kindness became indispensable to him. She was the one who could make him laugh when he was sad, and the one who could calm him when he was in a rage. She was the one who filled the void in his soul, and the one who made his life complete. A year later, they had a son, whom they named Jacob, after Jack's father. The ranch was filled with laughter, and everyone who saw them said that they were the embodiment of true love and family happiness. Isabella finally felt that she had found her home, her family, her love. She was no longer a bounty. She was a wife, a mother, and a partner who, together with the man she loved, built her own empire. The moral of this story, simple and profound. Don't judge people by their reputation. True strength is not in cruelty, but in kindness, which can heal even the deepest wounds. Love is able to transform a person and change their life for the better if they are ready to open their heart. And only a person who is willing to sacrifice themselves for others can find true happiness and create a family that will be a reliable support for them in life.